By the late 1890s, the Chinese Qing Empire has been rocked by a string of disasters: a brutal civil war, military defeats by the West, Russia and Japan, and lost territories. Foreign powers forced Qing officials to sign unequal economic treaties, in spite of a US proposal for free trade. In response, Chinese intellectuals and politicians promote a self-strengthening movement to catch up with the foreign powers. And in 1898, the Guangxu Emperor launches a hasty 100-day reform program. But the more influential Dowager Empress Cixi opposes it, and the plan fails. Meanwhile, Western and Russian companies build railways and mines, and establish the legation quarters, special districts in Chinese cities for foreigners. The railways and other new technology disrupt the Chinese economy, throwing millions into unemployment and poverty. European and American Christian missionaries also bring change. By the mid-1890s, more than 2,000 missionaries have converted nearly 600,000 Chinese. Missionaries reject Qing court's authorities and use their influence to protect Chinese Christians in legal disputes with non-Christians. They also oppose traditional ancestor worship, and some claim equality with Chinese governors or viceroys. This angers local landowners, traditionalists, and peasants. Some Chinese turn to secret societies for help against roaming bandits or privileged foreigners and converts, and the Big Sword Society kills 2 German missionaries in Shandong province in 1897. It is in Shandong province that the biggest secret society forms. They practice martial arts and call themselves the Righteous and Harmonious Fists, but foreigners know them as the Boxers. The region is suffering from economic dislocation, religious tensions, the 1898 Yellow River flood, and the 1899 drought. Some believe the flood foretells the coming fall of the Qing Dynasty. Refugees, unemployed young peasant men, and some landowners are drawn to the Boxers' message. The foreign devils are starting missions, erecting telegraphs, and building railways. They do not believe in the sacred doctrine, and they speak evil of the gods. Their sins are numberless as the hairs of the head. The will of heaven is that the telegraph wires be first cut, then the railways torn up, and then shall the foreign devils be decapitated. The Boxers also blame missionaries for the drought. No rain comes from heaven, the earth is parched and dry, and all because the churches have bottled up the sky. The Boxers are decentralized with many local groups. There's no overall leader. They believe they can call on gods to possess them and protect them in battle, and practice rituals including chanting and prostrating themselves. Boxers mostly target Chinese converts and Chinese working for foreign railways or businesses. They draw attention by clashing with Qing troops despite their slogan, "Support the Qing, destroy the foreigners," and by killing British missionary Sidney Brooks in December 1899. The movement spreads quickly, reaching Beijing in May 1900. Western missionaries and diplomats complain to their governments, who pressure the Qing to crack down. Some Russians, though, say they sympathize with the Boxers. What is happening in China is really a people's war. As Russians, we cannot deny the great significance of people's wars. In 1812, we won a people's war against Europe and crossed its territory to the very capital of the world, Paris. St. Petersburg, though, does not see things this way, and such statements do not stop Boxers from cutting Russian-controlled rail and telegraph lines in Manchuria. The Dowager Empress Cixi's government publicly threatens the Boxers with harsh punishment, but the movement is too big to control, and the court is split. Moderates like Prince Qing urge restraint, while hardliners like Prince Duan want to use the Boxers against the foreigners. The Dowager Empress adopts an ambiguous policy. Sometimes she labels the Boxers bandits and orders imperial troops to defend the legations, but she also prevents her generals from fully suppressing them. The violence escalates. In Beijing, the Boxers kill many Chinese Christians and then ramp up attacks on foreign missionaries and their churches, schools, and residences. In late May, a few hundred foreign troops, including US Marines, arrive to protect the legations. In response, Boxers cut the Beijing-Tianjin Railway. The 500 foreign civilians, 400 soldiers, and 3,000 Chinese Christians now trapped in the legation quarter fear the worst, as American Bessie Ewing writes. We slept in our clothes, ready for instant flight to the Russian legation, and if necessary, from there to the British, as our final stronghold. Cheng Lin comes in to tell me that the American board compound, including the printing press, was first looted and then burned, and that many of our Christians were killed. Foreign forces sometimes strike out from the legations, including one attack on Boxers in a temple that kills 45. The US, Britain, Japan, Russia, France, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy now form a loose coalition known as the Eight-Nation Alliance. They aim to suppress the Boxers and, as they see it, protect their citizens and property in a lawless China. As they gather warships off the port of Daegu, a message arrives from British Minister in Beijing, Claude Maxwell MacDonald. Situation extremely tense. Unless steps are made for the immediate advance on Peking, it will be too late. Alliance naval officers agreed to send troops to relieve the foreign legations in Beijing. In fact, they'll meet regularly in the next months, marking one of the first efforts at organized coalition warfare in the 20th century. Since their home governments are so far away, the Naval Council often acts independently. British Rear Admiral Edward Seymour leads a 2,000-strong force up the Hai River from Tianjin, including about 900 British, 450 German, 300 Russian, 150 French, and 100 American troops. Their train convoy leaves on June 10th, but it doesn't get far. Local Boxers rip up sections of track, and a pattern emerges. The expedition stops to repair, and the Boxers ambush them. The Boxers lack heavy weapons and rifles. Many are armed with bamboo spears, large knives, or large muskets known as jingals. At first, they approach Alliance troops slowly, waving banners and performing rituals. When Western bullets cut them down, they adapt, using quick charges or luring Alliance troops to break formation. Still, Alliance firepower, including a Gatling gun, inflicts significant casualties on the Boxers. The Boxers, though, tear up the repaired sections of track behind the expedition, endangering resupply. Meanwhile, in Beijing, the Qing court is suspicious of Seymour's incursion. Imperial forces don't try to stop Seymour, but they do plan to mine the Hai River and reinforce the forts at its mouth at Daegu. Alliance naval officers need the river to send more troops to Beijing, so they demand the Chinese surrender the forts or face attack. Just before the ultimatum runs out on June 17th, Chinese guns open fire on 9 Alliance vessels, which return fire. But the lone American ship stays out of the fight as it has orders not to attack. Within 7 hours, British and Japanese troops storm one fort, naval fire takes out another, and the final 2 surrender. The Alliance now controls the mouth of the Hai, but Seymour is still in trouble. On June 18th, 2,000 Boxers attack the expedition at Langfang. But this time, 3,000 Chinese Muslim soldiers of General Dong Fuxiang's Gansu Braves army join them. In a sign of things to come, poorly trained Chinese imperial troops' rifle fire is inaccurate, but the artillery performs well, and they inflict 50 casualties. Seymour retreats towards Tianjin, low on food and ammunition. Before they can reach the city, they capture the Chinese arsenal at Shigu and shelter there, surrounded by 5,000 Imperial Chinese and Boxer troops. So Seymour's expedition has failed, and disappointed foreign residents in Beijing refer to him as Admiral See No More. The Alliance attack on the Daegu forts has succeeded, but it brings serious consequences. For the Qing court, Seymour's expedition and the attack at Daegu are grave violations of China's sovereignty, so the Dowager Empress decides for war. On June 21st, the Emperor issues an edict against the alliance. For the past 30 years, foreigners have taken advantage of China's forbearance to encroach on China's territory and trample on the Chinese people, and to demand China's wealth. They oppressed peaceful citizens and insulted the gods and holy men, hence the burning of the chapels by patriotic braves. Those others rely on crafty schemes. Our trust is in heaven's justice. They depend on violence, we on humanity. It will not be difficult to vindicate the dignity of our country. But the Qing court's position is weak. They are ethnic Manchus, and some of the majority Han Chinese resent their rule. Others refused to join the war, like southern provincial governors including Yuan Shikai and Li Hongzhang, who form a mutual defense pact. Confusingly, a week after the war edict, the emperor calls for restoring order and for some Boxers to be arrested. On paper, the Qing have over 300,000 troops available under overall commander Ronglu, but in practice, only about 70,000 are ready to defend Beijing. The weaknesses of the Chinese army, though, make little difference to the foreigners trapped in Beijing, where the siege of the legations begins on June 20th. Just before the war edict, Dowager Empress Cixi instructs the foreigners to leave Beijing under escort of her army. But the foreigners are afraid, and a Manchu soldier kills German diplomat Clemens von Ketteler as he's on his way to meet Chinese officials, less than 2 weeks after Boxers killed a Japanese envoy. Boxers have also burned many buildings in and around the city associated with foreigners or Chinese converts, including burning converts alive inside their churches. The Boxers and Qing forces don't launch an all-out assault, instead slowly constricting the foreign pocket with small-scale attacks, rifle and shell fire, and setting fire to buildings. The Alliance garrison anchors its defense on the 15-meter-high Tartar wall and the northern cathedral, which is defended by French and Italians. Boxers and Imperial units advance barricades to inch along the top of the wall and dig underneath the cathedral to set off explosives. The Chinese do make some gains. They capture the French legation thanks to underground mining, and they drive the Germans off the Tartar wall, though a British, Russian, US counterattack regains the position. Future US Marine General Captain John Myers plays a key role in the fighting. American Minister Edwin Conger tries to negotiate, but talks fail, and by mid-July, the trapped foreigners and converts are desperate. The Chinese have the strength to overwhelm their enemy, but they're not decisive. In fact, there's no direct order to besiege the legations. General Ronglu holds back, as he feels China cannot win the war, and his troops even clash with some Boxers and Dong's Gansu Braves. As the siege in Beijing continues, the alliance gathers forces to relieve another siege at Tianjin. Soon after Seymour's doomed expedition leaves Tianjin on June 10th, Boxers and Chinese troops under General Nie Shicheng besiege the city's legation quarter and attack Russian troops at the rail station. By the end of June, Alliance troops rescue Seymour's men and relieve the siege of the legations, including future US President Herbert Hoover and his wife Lou, who are among the 700 foreigners freed. But Chinese reinforcements bring their strength up to perhaps 25,000 Imperial troops and Boxers, and the attacks continue. American Wendell Brown comments on a Boxer assault. They move toward us led by huge figures in head masks, and women in white turbans and red sashes, carrying red and black banners. Groups of spearmen carrying red-tasseled spears, jingle crews, swordsmen, riflemen, and archers were flanked by bands of blaring trumpets. Chinese assaults put Alliance forces under extreme pressure, but they hold on. On July 13th, about 7,000 Alliance troops counterattack the city and its 5-meter-thick walls. In principle, they're under British General Arthur Dorward, but there are problems with command and control. In most places, intense Chinese fire, swampy ground, and a lack of cover cause Alliance forces to bog down. The initial assault fails, but overnight, a Japanese military engineer blows up a key gate, and himself, which breaks the Chinese defense. The next day, the city falls. Allied troops loot the town and fire on civilians, causing thousands to flee. They also capture the leader of an all-female Boxer unit, Lin Haier, and probably execute her. She later becomes a Chinese folk hero. The Battle of Tianjin cost the Alliance 750 killed and wounded, nearly half of them Japanese. Thousands of Chinese soldiers and civilians are killed, and the town is in ruins. This main street and the surrounding houses were a holocaust of human life. A day later, that long thoroughfare was a slow-moving line of homeless, weeping human beings, their homes in ashes, without food, friendless, and in many cases, their kindred left charred in the ruins of their homes. Tianjin is a close-run battle, but now the Alliance have a secure base for another expedition to Beijing. As alliance forces plunder Tianjin, diplomats and military planners on both sides spring into action. Even before the loss of Tianjin, the Qing court knows it needs allies, so Emperor Guangxu messages Japanese Emperor Meiji and proposes that he switch sides. Should China be unsuccessful in opposing the West, Japan's independence will also be threatened, so China and Japan are on the same footing and should put their differences aside to preserve their national existence. An alliance with Japan would succeed in dispelling the present troubles and restoring order. Emperor Meiji refuses and urges peace. Several court officials advise the Dowager Empress to make peace as well, but she has them executed and their heads displayed in public. Meanwhile, the alliance gathers an international relief force to march on Beijing. Germany sends fresh troops from Europe, but they'll take many weeks to arrive. Kaiser Wilhelm sees them off with an infamous speech on July 27th. No quarter will be given, prisoners will not be taken. Just as 1,000 years ago, the Huns under their king Attila made a name for themselves, one that even today makes them seem mighty in history and legend, may the name German be affirmed by you in such a way in China that no Chinese will ever again dare look cross-eyed at a German. Afterwards, the German Foreign Office edits a toned-down version for the press. Back in China, alliance officers argue over who should lead the expedition. The Westerners and Russians don't want to serve under a Japanese, the Japanese don't want a Russian, and the French don't want a German. In the end, Russia supports Germany to spite Britain and Japan, and German General Alfred von Waldersee gets the job, but he won't get to China until September. British and American officers fear a fall start might expose the expedition to harsh winter weather, but the French and Russians argue that the summer heat and rains will be worse. When the British and Americans threaten to go it alone, the others agree to march now. British General Alfred Gazeley takes command of around 22,000 alliance troops, half of what is considered necessary to take Beijing. 10,000 Japanese, 4,000 Russians, 3,000 British and Indians, 2,000 Americans, 800 French and Indo-Chinese, 200 Germans, and smaller contingents from Austria-Hungary and Italy, and even a British-led Chinese unit. The relief force leaves Tianjin on August 4th, as US Marine officer Smedley Butler observes. French zouaves in red and blue, blonde Germans in pointy helmets, Italian bersaglieri with tossing plumes, Bengal cavalry on Arabian stallions, turban Sikhs, Japanese, Russians, and English. The troops suffer badly from the extreme heat. Many drop out from exhaustion, and still others are struck by dysentery. Chinese troops block their path at the town of Peitsang behind earthwork positions, and they flood a part of the front line. When alliance forces attack, the Chinese pin down the French and Russians who are caught on wet ground. But repeated Japanese assaults break the Chinese defense, and they pull back across the river. Casualties are about 1,500 on both sides. The next town Chinese forces choose to defend is Yangtsun, where they prepare similar defenses and flooded zones. This time, the British, Indians, and Americans take the lead. The Chinese fight hard, but their fire is inaccurate. British Indians and Americans compete to be the first into the Chinese line, and once again, Chinese forces retreat as they cannot hold their positions in close-quarter fighting. After Yangtsun, there's little organized Chinese resistance on the road to Beijing, as morale suffers and the Boxers melt away. Imperial advisor Li Bingheng now questions his support for the war. I have seen several tens of thousands of troops jamming all roads. They fled as soon as they heard of the arrival of the enemy. I have experienced many wars, but never saw things like these. Li kills himself the next day. Meanwhile, exhausted alliance troops leave a, quote, trail of fire and murder in their wake as they march in alternating extreme heat and rain. They make little distinction between civilians, imperial troops, and Boxers. All are seen as the enemy. Cohesion breaks down, as national contingents often don't coordinate their movements, and on hot days, up to 50% of the men fall behind. British Marine G.F. Cooper will later write, "It was what I should imagine an ice cream in hell would feel like." Still, by August 12th, the remaining half of the relief force reaches Beijing. Alliance leaders agree to attack together, but the Russians rush ahead and attack alone. The Japanese chase after them, followed by the others, as the great game for prestige overshadows military sense. Beijing's walls are massive, and the Chinese defenders stop the Russians and Japanese with heavy losses. But even a disorganized attack is enough against the dispirited Chinese forces. The Chinese commander leaves sections of the wall nearly undefended, and the British quickly reach the legations, followed by the Americans. There's a brief fight at the entrance to the Forbidden City before Japanese troops enter, but the Qing court has already fled. The Alliance conquest of Beijing is a disaster for the Qing, but it's not the only one. Chinese troops and boxers also operate against the Russian presence in Manchuria, attacking rail lines and stations and killing Russians. In July, Chinese guns bombard the border town of Blagoveshchensk. In response, Russian Cossacks and civilians carry out a massacre of hundreds of Chinese civilians, including women and children, near the Amur River. The shooting went on for about half an hour, at which point the riverbank became strewn with a jumble of corpses. After the shooting, the commanding officer gave the order to use hand weapons. The Cossacks used their sabers, and the conscripts were ordered to kill the disobedient Chinese with their axes. The Chinese wept. Some prayed and made the sign of the Orthodox cross, but to no avail. Russian forces then launch an invasion of Manchuria with 100,000 troops. They smash the Manchu banner armies facing them, and fighting rages along the main railway lines. Russian troops burn towns, massacre more civilians, and steal valuable livestock. By October, they take the regional capital of Mukden. In and around Beijing, Alliance occupation forces also loot, rape, and pillage. They burn and shell villages and execute thousands as boxers and Manchu officers, usually without any evidence. Foreign civilians and missionaries join in the looting and denouncing supposed boxers. As in Manchuria, most of these crimes go unpunished. General von Waldesee is frank. If anyone at home is naive enough to believe that Christian culture and customs are being spread here, they'll be sorely disappointed. A comparable destruction has not occurred since the 30 Years' War and the plundering French under Louis XIV in Germany. Alliance troops do offer some humanitarian aid like vaccines and food, but the crush of destitute people seeking help worsens overcrowding. After months of brutal occupation, the Dowager Empress accepts defeat and agrees to the Boxer Protocols in September 1901. China will pay an indemnity of 450 million silver dollars over 39 years, allow Alliance troops to occupy strategic points, create a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, suspend the state civil service examination, renegotiate existing economic treaties, and prohibit anti-foreign groups. China cannot import weapons or materials to make them, must dismantle some fortifications, and must execute pro-Boxer members of the court. They also have to apologize for the killings of Alliance diplomats, build memorials to them, and prohibit Chinese from living in the legation quarters. The protocol is a humiliation for the Qing court, which is badly weakened by its inability to protect China's sovereignty and by heavy losses among the Manchu armies and nobility. Their weakness will soon be put to the test by the Han majority. As for the Boxers, the movement largely disappears. Historians differ as to why, but one plausible explanation is that when the rains finally arrive in August, many Boxers return home to tend their fields, or because they feel their cause has succeeded in ending the drought and breaking the power of the missionaries and converts. The Eight-Nation Alliance makes many mistakes, but defeats China due to Chinese errors and weakness, Western technological superiority, and to some extent, good fortune. The behavior of the relief force and Russian armies in Manchuria, however, creates lasting resentment. Russian forces, in fact, do not leave China as agreed under the protocols, and there's even talk of annexing Manchuria. This further angers the Qing and regional rival Japan, foreshadowing another violent round of the Asian Great Game that will soon begin. The rivalry between Japan and the great powers would culminate in the Japanese invasion of the Western colonies in Southeast Asia in late 1941. One of them was the American-ruled Philippines, where Japan defeated the US forces and captured many after a month-long siege. In 1944, the US, under Commander Douglas MacArthur, started to liberate the Philippine Islands again. During their campaign, they launched multiple daring raids to free prisoners of war. If you want to learn more about the raid of the Cabanatuan prison camp in early 1945, check out our new series History's Most Daring Raids. And where can you watch History's Most Daring Raids? On Nebula, a streaming service we're building with other creators where you don't need to sift through a deluge of AI slop. Nebula is made and curated by humans, and it's available in 4K resolution on your browser, on your smartphone, smart TV, or streaming box like Apple TV or Roku. And that's not all. On Nebula, you can also watch all our regular videos ad-free and earlier than on YouTube. If you go to nebula.tv/realtimehistory, you can get an entire year of Nebula for just $30. Nebula is also a great gift, by the way. Just go to gift.nebula.tv/realtimehistory to give an entire year to family and friends, even if they already have an account. Whether you watch Nebula on your own or give it to someone else, you're supporting us here at Real Time History directly. We want to thank Beatrice Brown Arnold for her help with this episode. If you want to learn more about the Great Game in Asia, check out our video on the First Sino-Japanese War. As usual, you can find all the sources for this video in the description below. And if you're watching this on Nebula or Patreon, thank you so much for the support. We couldn't do it without you. I'm Jesse Alexander, and this is a production of Real Time History, the only history channel whose studio feels like ice cream in hell right now.